Oh, I'm Melissa Moore, and this is Miriam Hall, and we are the holders of a program called From Posture to Page, where we had this idea to combine Maitri Space Awareness with Miriam's creative writing discipline, which is also a contemplative discipline, to allow Maitri Space Awareness to inspire a kind of open space of creative expression. And so we're going to do that program in June, and we're just here to talk about it. Yeah,
I'm really struck when you mentioned that the word infusion came to mind,
yeah,
like a tea infusion, and that's often the case with Maitri Space Awareness, whatever practice we're doing along with it. So in Karuna training, it's often communication or compassion practices that then
yeah,
become infused with the families. Or by doing the Maitri Space Awareness practice, we pull out a flavor that's always there. We become more aware of it. So combining these is like a co-infusion of these two practices with each other. And I'm so excited because I've combined them
yeah,
with photography and we've combined them with compassion and psychological practices, but I've never done this with writing, with the
yeah.
posture. So it's a really exciting combination.
Yeah, we're breaking ground, which is
Yeah.
very interesting. It's interesting that someone I studied with, Dr. Ed Podvell, used to talk about Maitri postures as dosing.
Mm.
And that's what I've been thinking, like you're dosing with the family in a certain kind of way, and we can discuss and discover the best way to work with the usual aimless wandering and also writing prompts and that kind of thing. And I'm curious how you see the dosing of Maitri Space Awareness infusing your work.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I also love the word dosing because sometimes we joke, not joke, about how Maitri Space Awareness is like psychedelics without the drugs. So also there's sounds of like what's the, ability to access something that's already there, an
Mhm.
altered state, right? A way to be able to access some other bandwidth or some other channel that's available, which can sometimes be absolutely beautiful and clear and sometimes be full of static and totally confusing. And so I think that actually writing is very similar in that way. What are our muses? Who are our muses? And how do we access them? And so one of the things I think, and as we said, this is an experiment, so we'll see. But one of
Yeah,
the things I think might happen is that going through the families with writing helps us to recognize different kinds of muses, that there's not just one thing that inspires us, not
yeah,
just one energy,
yeah,
not just one ritual, but different ways to be able to access inspiration and
yeah,
support from the world for our creativity through different families and their qualities. And that dosing, I think, will help us to take a dose of it and then we can recognize it a bit better. Like, oh, right, I know what this is like. I know when the energy, for instance, of efficiency is helpful for me when
yeah.
a
What
deadline
is
helps me
it?
finish, and I know when it's not. So we may already know that, right? I already know that about myself. Like, when is a deadline, or as I call them, lifelines, like
Yeah,
lifelines? When is
yeah,
that useful and when is it not? But
yeah,
going deeper into that energy might help us open up to it in a
yeah.
different way.
And also the mandala itself has mojo in the sense that I always think of it like everyone who's ever practiced with this mandala in the various ways it's been used, and mostly in Tibetan iconography in such a way, fused together with the Bun tradition and, early tantra in India, all that coming together. And before being able to access that wisdom stream, I think that writing can do that too, but we don't always know what we're drawing from, right?
That's it. Yep.
And we don't trust it for sure. I don't. I can say, as someone who writes, I like to write. I love to write. It's so interesting what I think once I write it down. It's like, wow, I didn't know I thought that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, and and I really like that process.
There, of course, I can't think of who it is at this moment. Many writers have said this in different ways over the centuries, but somebody famous said basically, I don't know what I'm thinking until I write it. So it's like that kind of quality. And I just taught a couple of brief programs at a recovery festival last Saturday, introducing people to writing as a contemplative practice. And one of the things that's great about people in recovery is that we, myself included, are kind of used to just being really honest
Mhm.
about our darkest stuff. like what's the deepest stuff that we wouldn't generally talk about otherwise. And so people were able to be vulnerable, really honest, and kind of cut to the chase. But at the same time, everyone at the end of each workshop was like, wow, I didn't know that was in me. Like, it
Mhm.
wasn't until I wrote it down that I realized that was in me, that understanding, that wisdom, those questions, even that challenge. And so even people who are used to going pretty deep, which also can include meditators and Vajrayana practitioners and psychologists, folks who've been in therapy their whole adult lives, we still always have other layers and levels and pockets. And I think as you're saying, a lot of that is the lineages, right? The lineages of
Right.
the Maitri Space Awareness to bring this magic, and also lineages of writers
Yeah.
and all the reading that we've done that
Mhm.
Natalie Goldberg talks about. Whenever we read, we pull in their words into our bodies and they're inside of us.
Oh,
So,
that's exciting, yeah.
right, it's not just lineage as in I've read these books, but like these books are in me. This language
Yeah,
is in me.
that's interesting about writers. I rediscovered a writer that I used in my dissertation in the '80s, and I didn't know in the meantime she had written at least 6 or 7 more books. Her name is Terry Tempest Williams.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So she is this nature writer, and I used her premise in Refuge, which she won a lot of prizes for, about Salt Lake City and her mother dying, and the whole way in which landscape dictates, particularly the feminine. She was very big on that in that particular book. But she's written so much more, and she's been at Harvard. I just finished her most recent book, and I realize, like, and I love the books hearing her voice. It's like, and anymore, I'm channeling writers, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
I
I
only
do.
read one writer for, like, everything I can get my hands on. Do that, and I go through them now.
I've been, like, immersing myself in Tracy K. Smith, who's a former poet laureate, and
Uh-huh,
just, like, every all the poetry she's written, and now she's written memoirs about being a poet and written a book called Fear Less about not being afraid of poetry because
uh-huh.
so many people are, like, I
Yeah,
love that kind of deep dive,
I
and
know you
often they're the things that really happens when we deep dive into somebody like Terry Tempest Williams or Tracy K. Smith. They're both great examples of like have written many books, is that we start to feel their resources too. Like we feel their lineages, we
yeah,
feel who they're being called by and
yeah.
inspired by and the energies that they're working with.
In that way, they become ancestors. In that
That's it.
way, they're like lines or something. That's so interesting because I think I now am viewing the mandala much like a portal for all kinds of work and seeing it like a kind of, its own particular kind of cauldron, so to speak, that allows for wisdom to come in different forms and shapes and methodologies. And there's learning about the mandala, but that somehow we know the mandala. That's why it's called families. Families because we're familiar. So we can
It's
introduce the mandala very quickly, which we're going to do in this program. And we're only going to do one posture so people can get a taste of touching into that non duality that occurs in these postures, which draw from the Dzogchen Vajrayana tradition. So again, we're drawing on something ancient into the present moment. And we can just relax in what we don't know because you can't know that much in a short program like this. And then we'll see what we do know, right, through expression. And we've kind of played with the schedule a little bit, but what else would you say about the program, Miriam?
Yeah, I'm just really struck by what you said about the briefness, the shortness of the
Yeah.
program, because I think another thing that can happen is sometimes people get intimidated by depth, right?
Yeah.
And it can be a little intimidating if we say, let's take 7 days together and go into these families and do something. So to take a shorter amount of time to have a day program where in the
Yeah.
evenings it's free. You can go back to your room or back home or wherever else you're staying. You can go to your camping site and relax and have some space because, as we said, the name of the practice is Maitri Space Awareness. And it's so important that we mix all of this with space. And that's something that when we're dealing with words, especially, I find we need. Like over the 20 years of teaching this practice, that a lot of us will sort of, myself included, will sort of like deep dive into the words and forget to breathe, forget to take some room, you know? Forget to not write. Like, forget to also that not writing is a part of writing. And sometimes Natalie Goldberg talks about how silence is the other side of words.
Yeah, you mean sometimes instead of just saying, "Oh, I can't find any words," that there's a silence that's, descending,
Needed.
and you trust that and
Yeah.
into that, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it's a key part as you know, we often talk about how compassion and emptiness are actually the same. And so one of the things I love about the name Maitri Space Awareness is that Maitri is loving kindness and space awareness. So it's awareness of those two together, right?
Right.
So we need loving kindness. We need compassion when we practice with writing because our stories often generate a lot of intensity. They can bring up shame and vulnerability. And so we do need space, and we also really need that loving kindness and compassion. And those are inherent in the families, but they can be a little more difficult to find when we're packing in a program. Some of our programs are we love it, and they're a bit more intense. And what I love about this is that it can give all of us, yourself and myself included, like a chance to breathe while
Yeah.
we're testing out and feeling out what happens.
The mandala naturally, in its body, speech, and mind, has basic sanity. And if we teach it from the perspective of its body, the elements, speech, the conflicted emotion, and mind would be more elaborate on this, but let's say in our case, the wisdom, and we look at synchronizing this through contemplative writing, that's what I see. And so I see dots of introducing, because some people might be new to this, I think. And so we have to somehow seat the mandala very lightly and then do the posture and then,
Yeah.
whatever. It's fun. So I think that's good. Thank you. I look
Thank
forward
you.
to this. I really
Yeah.
do.